So we're moving right along, and now we are into community interactions. So we're going to talk about competition, predation, herbivory, symbiosis, and a little bit of facilitation. So starting off, competition. This in the 1930s, there was this guy named Gauss, and he studied two different species of Paramecium. And based on his studies, he came up with this principle called the competitive exclusion principle. And essentially, this says that no two species can occupy the same niche at the same time. And remember, a niche is an organism's role in an ecosystem or in a community. And so what you can see over here is a graph of the two types of Paramecium. So the first Paramecium was growing, or originally he put them in a test tube, and they were growing, looks like exponentially together. But because of the competitive exclusion principle, meaning that these two species, which occupy very similar niches, they can't do that at the same time. So one species went down, and the other continued to grow exponentially until it reached a carrying capacity. So some further explanation of his experiments, he determined this idea of resource partitioning and character displacement. And resource partitioning is the apportioning of resources in order to decrease competition between two species. The best example to explain this is owls and hawks. They both feed on very similar prey, like small rodents, but the difference is owls will hunt during the evening and hawks will do so during the day. So they've apportioned these resources at different times in order to decrease the competition between them. And so this has an evolutionary context to it. And then character displacement is the tendency for characteristics to be more divergent when the populations belong to the same community instead of when they are isolated. And so what does that really mean? Well, for example, here, finches. Finches eventually evolved different beaks, so they were actually feeding on completely different food sources. So character displacement was taking that character or that beak shape and causing a divergent evolution event or an adaptive radiation event where different finches were adapted to different food sources based on their beaks. So here's just an example reiterating that example of talking about the finches, so character displacement, different size beaks correlated to different food sources. Over here, you have resource partitioning. So you have different species of warblers, and those different species of warblers will actually forage or gather food in different areas of the tree. So they've apportioned those resources based on space or spatial resource partitioning here. You guys will also need to read that article on resource partitioning in the ecology project. Moving on to predation, this is when a predator is going to feed on a prey. And so preys have actually evolved to many different defenses. You have active defenses, which are be things like hiding or attacking back, things like that, and you have passive. And so some examples of passive defenses. Aposematic coloration. This is also known as a warning coloration. So this is when organisms evolve these very bright colors to kind of showcase that they are poisonous organisms, and so it decreases the amount of predation on them. And then we also have mimicry. So we have Batesian mimicry, which is when a harmless organism will mimic a poisonous one. So the viceroy and the monarch. The viceroy butterfly is harmless, but it looks almost identical to the monarch. So as a result, neither one is predated on very much. And then there's Muellerin mimicry, which is when two poisonous species resemble each other. And so as a result, both of them are going to increase their numbers because they both resemble each other. The difference here is that both are actually poisonous. They've just evolved a similar coloration. Herbivory is when organisms eat all or parts of the plants. We're going to talk about plants and a little bit about their evolution, but plants have several defenses, including spines and thorns, so those physical characteristics, and then also several chemical defenses, things like morphine and nicotine as toxins or poisons to other organisms or herbivores. And then we also have symbiosis and facilitation. Facilitation just means that one organism can help another thrive. And symbiosis, we're not going to spend too much time on because you've discussed this probably in other courses. Parasitism, mutualism, commensalism. So remember, parasitism is when one species benefits and the other is harmed. Commensalism is going to be when one species benefits and the other is neither neither helped nor hurt. And then mutualism is when both species are going to benefit. And so this idea of both species benefiting, mutualism, typically kind of relates to facilitation when one species helps or benefits the other. So it could be a mutualistic relationship there or even a commensalism relationship.